London, September 1940. Flames rolled across the city as if the night itself were burning. Entire streets vanished under the weight of German high-explosive bombs. Fire crews fought losing battles against collapsing roofs, ruptured gas lines, and walls that groaned before falling in sheets of brick and steel. Above the destruction, the Luftwaffe returned again and again, unopposed for long stretches, seeking to break Britain before winter arrived. Inside this chaos, while most of London ran for shelters or fire hoses, one man stood motionless on the rooftop of the Air Ministry. Henry Tizard watched the firestorms spreading across the skyline. Sirens echoed between buildings. Anti-aircraft guns hammered the sky, but Tizard's expression stayed calm, cold even. He was not a soldier, nor a general, nor a man trained for frontline drama. He was a scientist, and what he saw that night told him something brutal and undeniable. Britain could not survive this war through courage alone. The RAF was fighting with remarkable skill, but pilots were exhausted. Several squadrons were down to a handful of machines, and replacement production lagged dangerously behind losses. British factories were damaged, workers overstretched, and supply lines strained. Tizard understood the mathematics better than anyone in Whitehall. Germany could replace aircraft faster than Britain could shoot them down. In pure industrial terms, Britain was being smothered. If the war continued on production numbers alone, it would end only one way. But Britain held one advantage, an advantage so extraordinary that almost no one outside a small circle understood its true value. For years, British laboratories had quietly constructed the foundations of modern scientific warfare. Radar stations along the coast, experimental microwave generators, early jet engines, new anti-submarine detection methods, even primitive studies into nuclear fission. The ideas were ingenious, decades ahead of anything Germany possessed. But ideas did not win wars unless they could be built, distributed, and deployed at scale. And scale was exactly what Britain lacked. Standing on that rooftop, Tizard accepted a truth that few in power dared to voice. Britain's only chance of survival did not lie in defending the skies alone, nor in holding the seas, nor in the bravery of its pilots. Its survival depended on whether those secret technologies could be turned into tens of thousands of machines, devices, and systems before Germany's industrial superiority crushed the empire completely. The equation was simple. Britain had the brains, it did not have the factories. It was at this moment that a thought, one he had resisted for months, finally became unavoidable. If Britain could not build these technologies fast enough, someone else would have to. Someone far away from the Blitz. Someone with enormous industrial muscle. And there was only one nation capable of such production: the United States. But America was neutral, politically divided, unwilling to enter the European war. The idea of giving Britain's most important secrets to a country sitting on the sidelines bordered on madness. Yet Tizard saw no alternative. If Britain fell, those secrets would die with it. Over the next weeks, as London burned night after night, Tizard shaped a proposal unlike anything in British history. He would go to the Americans. He would go with everything, every blueprint, every device, every research document Britain possessed. No bargaining, no demands, no conditions. Most senior officers reacted with disbelief. Some thought Tizard had lost his senses. To hand over Britain's crown jewels, technologies decades ahead of anything the world had seen, was unthinkable. What if America accepted the secrets and still refused to join the war? What if the information leaked? What if the Germans intercepted something? One misstep could hand the enemy unimaginable advantage. Churchill himself hesitated. The Prime Minister knew the importance of science, but this proposal carried risks that could not be taken lightly. Intelligence officers warned of espionage. Naval commanders feared losing radar superiority. Air leaders feared losing control over jet research, and some insisted that Britain must keep its most advanced technologies to itself, even if the war turned against them. Tizard listened to every concern, but he did not waver. His argument was relentless, mathematical, and brutally rational. Keeping a secret was meaningless if your country collapsed before it could use it. Germany's manufacturing power dwarfed Britain's, and the Luftwaffe's pressure on the RAF was increasing weekly. Without industrial-scale scientific production, Britain would fall, radar or no radar.
So Tizard gathered a team, not politicians, not public figures, scientists, engineers, and military officers who understood the stakes, men he trusted, men who could explain Britain's inventions with precision. Their mission would be conducted under absolute secrecy. They would cross the Atlantic and present the Americans with a gift no nation had ever offered another: the sum total of Britain's scientific achievements. Everything would be placed into a small, unmarked, black, metal-framed suitcase. A device no larger than a bar of soap, the cavity magnetron, would sit inside. Next to it, radar blueprints, jet propulsion research, anti-submarine detection notes, and early nuclear investigations. A century of British innovation condensed into a single container. By late August, the Tizard mission had final approval. But approval did not mean enthusiasm. Many in Whitehall still opposed the plan. Some saw it as surrendering national advantage. Others believed the Americans would never understand the importance of what they were being given. Yet Tizard moved forward with the same steady determination he had shown all his life. On a quiet, overcast morning, his team packed the case. Engineers double-checked the magnetron. Officers secured the documents. The suitcase was locked, sealed, and signed into military records. It looked ordinary, almost disappointingly plain. But inside it lay the tools that could change the war, if placed in the right hands. As Tizard prepared to leave for North America, London endured another night of devastation. Firefighters battled collapsing warehouses. The Thames glowed orange. Entire families huddled in stations while the Luftwaffe pounded the docks. It was a stark reminder of what failure would look like. If the Tizard mission failed, if America dismissed them, or refused the offer, or delayed too long, Britain might not survive the coming winter. In the early hours, Tizard boarded the aircraft that would lift him out of a burning empire. He was leaving behind a nation fighting for its life. Ahead of him waited a neutral government, a divided Congress, and scientists who had no idea what would soon land on their desks. The question followed him into the sky. Was he saving Britain, or giving away the last advantage it had left? Washington, D.C., September 1940. The city felt strangely untouched by the war that was consuming Europe. There were no blackout curtains over windows, no cratered streets, no sirens cutting through the night. Government buildings stood white and unscarred beneath bright morning skies. To Henry Tizard, who had just come from a London lit by burning warehouses and collapsing rooftops, the calm was almost unsettling. America was still officially neutral. The public was divided. Many believed Europe's war was not their concern. Others feared that accepting British intelligence or materiel might drag the United States into a conflict most citizens wanted to avoid. And in the corridors of Washington's scientific community, the British reputation was a complex mix of admiration and suspicion. American researchers respected British innovation, but they knew Britain guarded its secrets fiercely. Tizard arrived without fanfare. No officials greeted him. No journalists followed him. No one in Washington understood the significance of the small metal-framed suitcase carried by his team, a case containing technologies that could reshape the war before it reached America's shores. His first major meeting was arranged inside the National Defense Research Committee, a newly formed body led by Vannevar Bush, a formidable figure in American scientific policy. Bush was brilliant, authoritative, and skeptical of exaggerated claims. He expected cooperation from Britain, but nothing more than guarded exchanges of small research items. He did not expect what Tizard was about to place before him. The meeting room was quiet. Engineers, military representatives, and scientific advisors gathered around the long table. Tizard spoke calmly, without drama. His team placed the black suitcase on the polished surface and unlatched it. When Tizard lifted the lid, there was a moment of absolute silence. Inside lay the cavity magnetron, a copper-colored device that looked simple enough to be mistaken for a piece of plumbing, yet its importance was immeasurable. Bush's eyes narrowed immediately. The American radar program had struggled for years with bulky, low-power transmitters that limited radar's practical use. The magnetron produced microwave power thousands of times greater than anything American laboratories had managed. Its size alone rewrote the possibilities of radar warfare.
Bush leaned forward. Engineers pushed closer. Within seconds, the room's energy changed. Shock turned to excitement. Surprise to urgency. Even before Tizard finished explaining how the magnetron functioned, the American scientists understood what it meant. Airborne radar, compact, powerful, and precise, was not only possible, it was ready. But the magnetron was only the beginning. Tizard's team laid out radar blueprints from the Chain Home system, revealing the operational network that had helped Britain survive the Battle of Britain. They produced research papers on jet propulsion, work years ahead of American development. Anti-submarine sonar improvements, high-frequency direction-finding techniques, early nuclear notes from the tube alloys program, documents that traced the theoretical path toward a weapon derived from atomic fission. One American physicist held the magnetron in both hands, stunned. "This," he whispered, "is worth more than an entire battleship." Across the table, the realization spread. Britain was not negotiating or seeking to trade. Britain was giving everything. Bush asked the question everyone was thinking. Why? Tizard's reply was simple, almost emotionless. Winning is more important than ownership. His words carried no bravado, no theatrics, just logic delivered with the calm certainty of a man who had watched his country burn night after night. Britain could not survive on secrecy. It needed America's industrial power. Millions of workers, vast manufacturing lines, untouched cities, and a scientific community capable of scaling ideas into armies of machines. The Americans were stunned by the honesty, stunned by the trust, and stunned by the scale of the gift. In one afternoon, Britain had laid its scientific soul on the table. After that meeting, doors opened, meetings multiplied, interest surged. American naval commanders demanded briefings. Air Force engineers requested immediate technical sessions. Representatives from Bell Labs arrived to examine the magnetron. MIT's radiation laboratory began drafting production proposals within days. The entire American research community seemed to pivot overnight. Britain had expected cooperation. What came instead was momentum, fast, focused, and overwhelming. Over the next few weeks, American engineers refined the magnetron, designing methods for mass production. Workshops began producing test units. Assembly lines were reconfigured to accommodate the new technology. Discussions expanded to include radar integration on aircraft, ships, submarines, and coastal stations. The shift was so rapid that even Tizard felt its speed. In Britain, research committees debated for months before approving tests. In America, factories moved from prototype to manufacturing in a matter of weeks. Every engineer who handled the magnetron understood it could become the beating heart of a new form of warfare, one the Axis had no answer for. As the mission progressed, the American scientific community started sharing openly as well. Notes on electronic circuits, advanced manufacturing processes, vacuum tube improvements, and laboratory data began flowing back to Britain. For the first time in the war, transatlantic science operated as a single machine. But while cooperation flourished inside laboratories, resistance brewed elsewhere. Isolationists in Congress warned that deep scientific ties could force America into the war. Some military leaders were uneasy that Britain had leapt ahead technologically. Others questioned whether the magnetron was truly as revolutionary as it seemed. Yet the skepticism could not stop the surge. Every test confirmed the value of the magnetron. Every meeting opened new pathways. Every demonstration strengthened America's belief that this partnership was essential. For Tizard, the success was profound, but it also carried a weight he could not ignore. He had handed over technologies Britain had guarded for years. He had done so because he believed the alternative was national extinction. But as he watched American scientists grasp the full potential of British ideas, an unspoken question began to form. Was Britain building an alliance, or was it quietly passing the torch of global scientific power? It was too early to know the answer, but the magnetron was already being prepared for mass production, and radar units were being designed for aircraft, ships, submarines, and coastal stations. The transformation of the war had begun. Tizard had come seeking help. He found a partner ready to reshape the battlefield. By the winter of 1940, the impact of the Tizard mission was already rippling outward. American laboratories previously struggling with limited radar capabilities were now restructured around the magnetron. Engineers who once believed high-power compact radar was still a decade away were suddenly drafting installation plans for aircraft, destroyers, submarines, and coastal defenses. What Britain had placed into a single suitcase was becoming the blueprint for an industrial revolution in wartime electronics.
The first major transformation occurred in the air. American-built radar units, derived directly from the British magnetron, were fitted into test aircraft within weeks. These early systems were crude but powerful. They could see through darkness, rain, and cloud, conditions that had long protected German bombers and U-boats. For the first time, Allied air patrols possessed a technical edge that the Luftwaffe could neither predict nor counter. British night fighters, guided by ground controllers and now increasingly aided by airborne radar, began intercepting German bombers with unprecedented accuracy. The darkness, which had once shielded the Luftwaffe, was no longer an ally. Test results from the new radar units showed that a single patrol aircraft could locate targets at ranges previously considered impossible. American engineers, astonished by the magnetron's performance, accelerated development. Every improvement, every refinement, every breakthrough was transmitted back to British laboratories, strengthening both nations simultaneously. The effect at sea was equally dramatic. The Atlantic, once ruled by German U-boats, began to shift. For months, the Kriegsmarine had operated under the belief that surface darkness made their submarines invisible to patrol aircraft. But radar-equipped patrol bombers could detect U-boats as soon as their conning towers broke the surface to recharge batteries. Reports soon emerged of U-boats being spotted at night, tracked, and attacked before they could dive. Wolf packs that had once roamed the ocean with near impunity were suddenly exposed. The Allied convoy system, strained since the start of the war, began to stabilize. Shipping losses decreased. Merchant captains reported sightings of aircraft sweeping the horizon at night, their newly fitted radar sets combing the dark waters for movement. U-boat commanders, once confident in their ability to strike and vanish, now found themselves hunted by technology they had never imagined Britain possessed. Behind every operational success lay the frantic machinery of American industry. Factories working around the clock produced magnetron units by the hundreds. Bell Labs and Western Electric refined manufacturing techniques, reducing defects and increasing reliability.
MIT's radiation laboratory expanded into one of the greatest wartime scientific institutions in history, employing thousands of engineers focused entirely on radar development and deployment. Every advance fed back into British hands, allowing the RAF, Royal Navy, and coastal defenses to adopt improved systems faster than Germany could respond. Tizard followed these developments closely from London. Reports from Washington detailed rapid progress. Reports from the battlefield confirmed it. He knew that each radar-equipped aircraft, each improved signal amplifier, each new detection method owed its existence to the decision he had made on that burning rooftop months earlier. Yet the consequences of his gamble continued to deepen in ways he had predicted and ways he had not. As 1941 progressed, scientific cooperation expanded beyond radar. Tizard's team exchanged jet propulsion theories with American researchers, providing insights derived from Frank Whittle's pioneering work in Britain. Though Britain lacked the industrial base to mass-produce jet engines, the Americans quickly fell into step, recognizing jet aircraft as the future of air warfare. Joint discussions began regarding engine turbines, heat-resistant alloys, and high-speed airflow. The seeds of transatlantic jet research took root. Even more sensitive was the nuclear component of the Tizard mission. British tube alloys notes, though early and theoretical, demonstrated that the British scientific community not only understood nuclear fission, but had begun charting the path toward a weapon of unprecedented power. American physicists studying the documents reacted with urgency. They realized that the atomic bomb was no longer a distant or hypothetical idea. It was a near-term possibility, one that demanded immediate, massive investment. Tizard had not intended to ignite America's nuclear program, but by sharing what Britain had already discovered, he accelerated the formation of what would soon become the Manhattan Project. In effect, he gave the Americans a starting line they did not know existed. Throughout 1941 and into 1942, American and British scientists communicated with increasing freedom. Laboratories exchanged experimental results, technical diagrams, and trial data as if they were branches of the same institution. The war effort had created a new force, a transatlantic scientific alliance, driven not by treaties or politics, but by a shared understanding that modern war would be won in research halls as surely as on battlefields. Yet this alliance also revealed a growing paradox. Britain had provided the ideas. America was now providing the scale. Factories across the United States had the capacity to build radar sets by the thousands, sonar systems by the hundreds, and experimental aircraft in entire squadrons. What Britain might have produced in years, America could produce in months. Some British officials grew uneasy. They saw Britain's most advanced innovations becoming American-led projects. They feared losing control over technologies that had originated in British laboratories. They worried that Britain's wartime brilliance would be overshadowed by America's extraordinary industrial power.
Tizard understood their concerns, but he saw the situation differently. From his perspective, ownership was irrelevant. Survival was everything. As he had argued from the beginning, a secret was worthless if it could not be built fast enough to matter. America was not stealing British science, it was multiplying it, amplifying it, turning it into a force capable of shaping the war's outcome. And the outcome was becoming increasingly clear across every theater. British night fighters saw the enemy before being seen. Patrol aircraft spotted U-boats with ruthless efficiency. Convoys began arriving safely in greater numbers. The Luftwaffe's losses in nighttime operations grew steadily. The Atlantic ceased to belong unquestioningly to German submarines. Bit by bit, the tide was turning, and the magnetron lay at the heart of it all. What began as a desperate mission had become the foundation of Allied technological dominance. For the first time since the fall of France, the Allies were not reacting, they were advancing, powered by British invention and American production. And Henry Tizard, the quiet scientist who had carried a nation's hope inside a small black suitcase, watched as the alliance he had forged reshaped the battlefield on a scale few could yet comprehend. By early 1942, the transformation unfolding across the Allied world was nothing short of extraordinary. What had begun as a desperate gamble inside a single black suitcase was now altering the trajectory of the global conflict. Every month brought new reports from the front lines, clear evidence that the scientific bridge between Britain and America was tightening, strengthening, and accelerating the war effort far beyond anything Germany had expected. In Britain, RAF commanders noted a measurable shift in air warfare. German night raids, once executed with deadly confidence, now faced layers of detection they could neither evade nor understand. Airborne interception radar, powered by the magnetron that had crossed the Atlantic inside Tizard's suitcase, was guiding British fighters into the dark skies with surgical precision. The Luftwaffe, which had relied on darkness for cover, began suffering losses that their crews found impossible to explain. Aircraft vanished mid-mission. Bombers were intercepted over the channel. Crews reported being tracked in pitch-black conditions where no human eye could possibly see. British operators knew the truth. It was the magnetron. German crews did not. And that confusion, that blindness, became a weapon all its own. At sea, the Allied advantage was even more decisive. The North Atlantic, once the graveyard of British shipping, was shifting away from the U-boats that had terrorized merchant convoys for years. Radar-equipped patrol bombers, guided by information from both British and American scientific teams, hunted submarines with unprecedented accuracy. Even the faintest echo of a conning tower breaking the surface could now be detected miles away. U-boat commanders began reporting nightmares. Aircraft appearing out of nowhere. Ships turning towards them before they could even prepare an attack. Convoys altering course as if warned by some invisible system. In Berlin, Admiral Donitz struggled to understand how the Allies were locating his submarines so consistently. The German Navy attempted countermeasures, new frequencies, new operating procedures, but nothing worked. The science that drove Allied radar was beyond anything Germany possessed. Their own microwave technology lagged by years, perhaps longer. They did not know that the key device, compact, powerful, and impossibly advanced, had been built in a British laboratory and carried across the Atlantic in a suitcase no one had bothered to inspect. The strategic impact was immediate and profound. Convoys that had once limped across the Atlantic now arrived with minimal losses. Supplies began flowing into Britain at levels that stabilized the war economy. American Lend-Lease equipment, tanks, trucks, aircraft, and ammunition arrived in quantities large enough to supply entire armies. And every safe arrival reinforced the same truth. Radar had become the silent guardian of the Atlantic. While radar reshaped the skies and oceans, the scientific alliance between Britain and the United States deepened in ways that would echo for generations. American laboratories, equipped with British research and driven by immense industrial might, became engines of innovation. MIT's radiation laboratory, born from the magnetron's arrival, expanded into a sprawling institution employing thousands of physicists and engineers. In less than a year, it became one of the most important scientific facilities in the world. New radar variants appeared rapidly. Airborne systems for night fighters, surface search sets for destroyers and cruisers, height-finding radar for air defense networks, long-range warning systems for coastlines. Engineers on both sides of the Atlantic shared improvements in design, manufacturing efficiency, power output, and reliability. Every refinement made its way into combat. Every improvement saved lives. But radar was only the beginning.
Jet propulsion, once an experimental curiosity, now became a topic of serious transatlantic collaboration. Frank Whittle's pioneering work, far ahead of its time, was dissected and expanded upon by American researchers. Discussions focused on turbine efficiency, fuel requirements, airflow dynamics, and the metals required to withstand extreme temperatures. Though wartime production pressures slowed immediate jet deployment, the groundwork laid during these years would ultimately shape the future of global aviation. The most secret and consequential partnership, however, centered on nuclear research. The tube alloys documents Tizard had delivered contained early British insights into nuclear fission, enough to demonstrate that an atomic weapon was not only possible, but achievable with sufficient investment. American physicists examining the notes realized instantly that the science was sound. Britain had uncovered the path. America now had the resources to walk it. This realization ignited an unprecedented mobilization. Within months, the United States launched what would become the largest scientific project in human history, the Manhattan Project. And although Tizard could not have predicted the exact scale or speed, he understood that by sharing Britain's early nuclear theories, he had accelerated the American program by years. Across 1942 and 1943, the scientific alliance functioned as a tightly coordinated machine. British experts visited American laboratories. American engineers traveled to Britain. Reports, test data, blueprints, and technical analyses crossed the Atlantic almost daily. The war had forced two nations into a scientific union unlike anything the world had ever seen. Yet the paradox grew deeper with every passing month. Britain had invented the technologies that formed the backbone of Allied success. But America, vast, untouched, and industrially unmatched, was becoming the center of global scientific production. What began as British innovation was now being manufactured, refined, and expanded on an American scale that Britain could no longer match. Some British officials felt uneasy watching their own inventions evolve in foreign factories. They feared that Britain's scientific leadership would fade behind America's expanding capabilities. Others worried about post-war influence, knowing that technological dominance often shaped diplomatic and military power. Tizard saw the situation through a different lens. He had never been concerned with national prestige. He cared only about results. Britain's survival depended on these inventions being built in vast numbers. Only America could do that. The war was not a contest of pride. It was a contest of endurance, logistics, and industrial muscle. And the results were undeniable. Night skies, once dominated by German bombers, were now patrolled by radar-guided fighters. Oceans, once terrorized by U-boats, now echoed with signals from Allied search planes. The Atlantic lifeline, Britain's artery of survival, was secured. German commanders, once confident in technological superiority, now fought a losing battle against science they could not match. The tide of the war had turned. Not through numbers, not through luck, but through innovation. British innovation amplified by American industry. It was everything Tizard had predicted. And yet, as America's laboratories continued to expand, as radar and electronic warfare became increasingly American-led, another truth emerged. Britain had saved itself, but in doing so, it had awakened a scientific superpower far greater than itself.
By the summer of 1944, the consequences of the Tizard mission were visible across every front of the war. Allied air forces operated with a precision that would have been unthinkable only a few years earlier. Radar-directed night fighters intercepted German bombers over the continent. Long-range patrol aircraft swept the Atlantic with confidence, forcing U-boats deeper, earlier, and more often, disrupting their ability to hunt effectively. Destroyers equipped with advanced sonar and radar systems coordinated attacks that squeezed German submarines from the moment they surfaced. Axis intelligence officers struggled to understand the scale of the Allied advantage. Their engineers worked tirelessly, trying to replicate high-power microwave radar, but the gap was simply too large. The cavity magnetron, compact, powerful, and revolutionary, remained far beyond their reach. Germany could adapt, Germany could shift frequencies, but Germany could not match what Britain had created and America was building by the thousand. Across 1944 and 1945, the partnership deepened even as the war moved toward its endgame. British and American laboratories continued exchanging results on radar jamming, electronic countermeasures, high-frequency detection, and advanced navigational systems. The integration became so seamless that Allied crews in the field rarely knew whether a device originated in a British laboratory, an American factory, or a joint committee somewhere in between. The Transatlantic Scientific Alliance had become a single entity, flexible, fast, and unmatched by any Axis equivalent. Yet the paradox that had emerged in the early years of collaboration now crystallized into historical reality.
Britain had invented radar networks, the magnetron, early jet research, anti-submarine innovations, and the beginnings of nuclear theory. But America's industrial power had multiplied these ideas on a scale Britain could not match. When the war ended in 1945, the United States stood as the world's most technologically advanced nation. Its electronic warfare capabilities, its manufacturing strength, and its nuclear program had eclipsed every other power on Earth. Britain, exhausted and economically strained, found itself stepping back from the scientific dominance it once held. Its wartime inventions had shaped the course of the conflict and simultaneously shaped the rise of a new global leader. Henry Tizard understood this better than anyone. He had not sought personal recognition, nor had he aimed to secure Britain's long-term supremacy. His goal had been singular: survival. And by that measure, his mission was one of the most successful gambles in British history. After the war, Tizard continued advising on scientific policy, urging governments to base national strategy on research, engineering, and evidence rather than rhetoric. His influence guided the formation of research councils and helped shape post-war science in Britain. But he remained largely unknown to the public. Soldiers had medals, pilots had stories, generals had statues. Tizard had a suitcase, and a legacy visible only to those who understood what had truly won the war. Because the truth was simple, and historians would later agree. The Second World War was not only fought with tanks, aircraft, and ships, it was fought with ideas. Ideas born in laboratories, refined in workshops, and deployed through machines that reshaped the battlefield. Radar networks, airborne interception, microwave systems, electronic warfare, jet propulsion, early nuclear research, all of these bore the imprint of the man who had calmly opened a black suitcase in Washington and offered the future of British science to a nation that had not yet chosen a side. One man, one mission, one gamble that saved Britain and changed the balance of global power for the century that followed.